So I welcome you all for our brainstorming session today. Hi, everyone. So the brainstorming session for today is for PALS, Partnership for Action Learning and Sustainability, for the academic year fall 2022 and spring 2023. I am Maha Tariq, PALS coordinator at Neighborhood Revitalization Section at the Planning Department. And I'll brief about PALS, and then I'll hand it over to Kim Fisher, who'll go delve into more detail about the program and the brainstorming session. And Kim Fisher is here with us. She is PALS program director at the University of Maryland. Kim, if you just want to say hi to everyone.
Hello. So glad to see everybody who's joined us. Some of you I've met and worked with in the past, and some are new, so that's really exciting. Thanks.
Okay. Zach, we can go over to the next slide. Yes. Before moving forward, I just wanted to let you all know that this meeting is being recorded and it will be shared on our website. Please mute yourselves and turn off your video cameras. Any comments or questions, if you'll have, please feel free to put it in our chat box and I can reply to it. If you want to ask questions, please, you may have to wait till the end of this presentation, which means right before our brainstorming session begins. And when talking, please remember to unmute yourselves. Okay. Prince George's County Planning Department partnered with the University of Maryland in 2019. And this program is administered by National Center for Smart Growth at the University of Maryland in College Park. The program is collaborated with the faculty and students at the University of Maryland to help Maryland communities become environmentally, economically, and socially more sustainable. PALS is designed to provide innovative, low-cost assistance to the planning department, and on the other end, it creates a real-world problem-solving experience for the students at the University of Maryland. And since we partnered with PALS at the University of Maryland, it's been 2.5 years, and we've completed almost 16 projects in last 5 semesters. And you can see on the slide, here's a list provided for the projects that have been completed. Spring 2022, the Bike Stress Map, this is underway right at this time. And these projects actually cover a range of topics, which include planning, development, historic preservation, environmental and social issues, and also transit-oriented development. I hope I'm not missing any topics here. And the links for all these reports for these projects are provided on our website if you want to go and have a look at it. Okay. So every academic year, a total of 7 projects are funded. So we end up having a maximum of 3 to 4 projects per semester. Today, we will be discussing ideas to bring these 7 projects to fruition for the upcoming academic year. And because the bigger challenge is to really to find the faculty match and the point of contact at the planning department. So that's why we want you guys to please share as many ideas today to bring it to the table. The point of contact is primarily a resource person who helps the faculty to finalize the scope of work, and they are invited to the kickoff meeting at the very beginning of each semester to share their past reports or any data that they may have. They are also invited to the midterms and to the final exam to provide their comments and suggestions. And it can be anybody from our planning department. I've been asked in the past that what are we looking in terms of time for the point of contact? So can you guys make any guess? Okay, hearing none. It varies. It depends on the nature of the project. And since I've been involved from quite some time now, I can tell that it varies from between 10 to 15 hours per semester, which means over a course of 4 months, it's just 10 to 15 hours. So going next, Zach. Okay. So this slide really tells us about that we are having a brainstorming session now. It talks about the timeline, how the project goes. We are in the brainstorming session now, which is March, and right after this, we'll find a faculty match and a point of contact. So once we're in doing that, it's in collaboration with the University of Maryland. The process is going simultaneously while Kim is finding a match at the University of Maryland for the faculty. I'm at the same time working at the planning department to find the point of contact. And for the fall semester, we have it done by July. For spring semester, we get it done by January because right before our kickoff meeting, which takes place in August for the fall semester and March for the spring semester. And then we have a point of contact. We'll be having a midterm meeting. We'll all be there. And then we'll have our final presentations, which will be made in December for the fall semester. And for the spring semester, it'll be in May. And right after our final presentations, within a week or so, we have our showcase. And as soon as we'll get the final deliverables, which is the presentation and the report from the University of Maryland, we post it on our website. Okay. So today, I'd really appreciate everyone to please contribute. And this is no real-time analysis, so feel free to share as many ideas as you guys can and as many crazy ideas as you can, because everything is welcome today, because we're not striving for the quality, but the quantity. And once the list is finalized, it'll be sent over to the supervisors at the planning department, and they'll suggest the best possible point of contact for the projects. And now I'll hand it over to Kim.
Thanks so much, Maha. I appreciate you going through that introduction. The first thing that I wanted to do was to introduce the PAL staff, because even for those of you who have worked with us before, we have some new people. So Kathy and Barbara, Alondra and Matt, if you can turn your camera on for just a second. Barbara, if you don't mind starting, just introduce yourself and what role you play at PALS.
Sure. Barbara Gussack. I handle most of the financial matters associated with the program, including writing contracts, getting proposals out, getting acceptances. So I've been working in the program for about 1.5 years. I have an accounting background and 40 years of federal government experience.
Great, thank you so much. And Kathy, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kathy Madsen, and I'm the PALS project documentation coordinator. So what I do is I accompany the faculty and students on any site visits or meetings with points of contact during the semester and take photographs. And then at the end of the semester, I conduct surveys of the students, the faculty, and the points of contact.
That's great, thank you. And Kathy has set up a Flickr site for PALS, which will show you that link at the end of the meeting. It has all of the photos that she has taken and the ones she sorted out from before she arrived. And these photos are available for you guys to use if you ever need them for, any of your reports or website or anything showing your staff working with the students. Next, I'll go to Alondra. Some of you may have seen her before the official meeting started.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Alondra Morales Luna, and I'm currently working with PALS almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
And I'm working on my master's in community planning. And the thing I do with PALS is I help Kim coordinate these meetings throughout the semester with the students in terms of midterm meetings and final presentations, and just collecting all the deliverables for final presentations and being it posted onto our website.
Yeah. And Alondra is graduating this semester, but at the end of the semester, but as she said, she's been with us for almost 2 years, so some of you may have worked with her. And finally, Matt. Matt has worked with us this year and also, I think, is about signed up for next year. Go ahead, Matt.
Hi, yeah, my name is Matt. I am also a student at Maryland along with Alondra, doing the same thing, just with a different set of projects. I am studying landscape architecture, and yep, I'll be here next year as well. So hopefully I'll be able to work with some of you on these projects.
Very good. Thank you so much. So that is our expanded team. And as we've added people in, we've really been able to do a lot more in terms of documentation and support for the students and faculty. And hopefully you've seen that support reflected in your interactions on our projects. So I just wanted to mention quickly, and maybe this is stating the obvious, but PALS really is kind of we think of it as a win-win collaboration. The students, as Maha said, really get a chance to understand the community that they're working in, understand the issues that the planning department faces, and get an opportunity to work on real world problems and kind of understand how their academic learning fits in with what they might be doing in the future. One of the things that happens almost every semester is I hear from one of the students from one of the projects saying, oh my gosh, this data is not clean, it's not complete, there's missing this or that. And you know, it's a good lesson. It's a good lesson for the students to understand that they're not always going to be working with perfect information, but they have to do the best job they can. The faculty are also really appreciative of the PALS collaboration, and that it gives them an opportunity to give back to the community that they live in and have worked in oftentimes for a long time. But it also gives them real experiences that they can share with their students. And that's always the goal of the faculty, in particular in the studios. And finally, we hope it's a real value to you. We aren't providing you with shovel-ready kind of designs or projects that maybe are at the completion, but it gives you a chance to tackle some problems that you might not have had the time or money to do in the past. And PALS can kind of help move you forward on those projects, and the students in particular can help move you forward. A lot of times, especially with, for example, landscape architecture that Matt mentioned, or our architecture department, we can give you good graphics as a part of the products that you can use to go for grants, to go for additional funding for those projects. And so we hope it's always a value to you, and that's incredibly important to us. I wanted to mention just a little bit about what makes a good project. Now, I don't want this to cause you to hesitate on suggesting any projects, because we will work through any suggestions you have. But what makes a good project is a fairly defined statement of work. The students basically have 14 weeks to do the work. Everything's done within a semester. And so fairly defined, fairly specific scope of work. About half of our students that we work with are undergraduates, and for the undergraduates, they really need a very specific scope. Graduate students, we can be a little more flexible with them, and they can kind of figure out aspects of the project as they delve into it. But good scopes, and importantly, also a good definition of what deliverables will be provided. Some of our projects don't really have a report. The deliverable instead is a website or a database or drawings, landscape architecture drawings. So it just depends, but we want everybody on the same page in terms of the actual deliverable. One thing, I know you guys spend a lot of time doing community engagement. That really isn't within the scope or timeline of students. We understand that all of your work is conducted in concert with the community, but for our students in that short a timeline, they really can't be as sensitive to the issues that you guys face and that you understand within the communities, and kind of puts them in a tough position. So we really don't have a lot of kind of free-form community engagement. Now, we have had in the past projects that have interviewed specific members of the community that the sponsors identified, and that works. And so it's not that we're trying to avoid community engagement, we just want to manage it and make sure that our students are in a good place with that. Can you go to the next slide, Zach? So the PALS program specifically is located within the School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, and we have obviously done a lot of projects within that organization. Real estate is also part of that school, but we work with students and faculty across campus. So as you're thinking of specific problems that you might be facing within the planning department, please think big, because we're able to tap into a lot of the different resources that we have on campus. So business school, engineering, landscape architecture, if you want to go to the next one, Zach. Video journalism, we've done a number of projects on historic preservation with Tom and Jennifer. Architecture will show you an example of that as we move forward. We always do a lot of work with our iSchool or information systems school. That work can range from websites and serving up information to the public, also data visualization, GIS work, and also we've done some pretty interesting database work with the iSchool. Go ahead, Zach. And then we also have done work with the agricultural school. We have on campus something called the Institute for Applied Ag, and that group has done a lot of work with us. We do a lot of environmental policy and science work. I know that the county has recently adopted a climate change plan that may be a really fruitful avenue for us to think about projects within, and the ENSP and ENST staff and our faculty and students are really interested in that kind of work. Next slide. So this is our new graphic that illustrates kind of what we do within a given project. So right now we are in project brainstorming, which is the dot at the bottom on the left. After we finish the brainstorming, we will assemble a set of projects with as much description as we can kind of garner from our conversation here. Your leadership will approve those projects, and as Maha said, we'll distribute them so that you guys all know what's coming. The faculty match starts as soon as I get an approved list of projects. And that faculty match and identification of the point of contact within your organization can be a little messy because it's kind of chicken and egg problem. I don't want to bother you to identify a point of contact until I know I have faculty that might be able to do the project. So Maha and I do a lot of back and forth, but we get it done. So that's fine. And after we get that match established, then your point of contact and the faculty that's going to be working on the project take a couple of calls to really, as I said, develop a strong scope of work and a strong description of the deliverable. So during our call today, we're not going to get that far into any of the problems, but rest assured, before faculty and students start working on it, we'll have a good sense of what you want out of the project. Then students take over. They start at the beginning of the semester, kickoff meetings. We do hold a kickoff meeting with all of the points of contact, so we can kind of explain to you what we see coming in the semester and what resources you have available. We are really encouraging people to do field trips. For the iSchool folks that work more within a computer environment, that's kind of hard, but we think it's good for our students to get out into the community and to see the areas they're working on, maybe to meet with you in your offices or in locations that they might be working on. So, and PALS supports those field trips. Matt and Alondra have the van pool on speed dial, so we're able to set those up. And then we do some final meetings, final reports. We have an editor that goes through the final documents. We want them to be very polished and professional by the time they get to you. So there is a little gap between the final presentation and when we deliver the final report to you. Kathy mentioned we've started really doing surveys to identify places that we can improve the program, things that really worked for you, all of that. So that's in that project debrief. So go ahead, next slide, Zach. We wanted to just show you a couple of projects, maybe to spur some thoughts. I see Adam's on the call, so this project that we're first going to talk about is the Sounds of Prince George's County. So we had a PhD music student work with Adam and Jonathan Green. I don't know if Jonathan's on, I haven't seen. But they worked on identifying the history of music in the Central Avenue corridor. And Julia, who is the PhD student, worked on a map that basically showed locations of music history in Prince George's County and a recording that someone could listen to. She also identified some resources that will be useful in moving forward with doing research in the musical history of Prince George's County. Do you want the next one, Zach? This one happened a little while ago. It was transit-oriented development design for Largo Town Center. The students did a lot of work looking at how the parcels could relate to the metro and to the surrounding neighborhoods, all of that. It was a really it's a major effort within our architecture studio, planning studio. Next one. This is the final one. We had a planning coursework on looking at how to support small scale production in Prince George's County. And this was headed up by an adjunct faculty member who is an expert in supporting small businesses and minority businesses in particular, underserved in particular. And so a small group of students identified where possible locations are for those production facilities, impediments, ways of encouraging them, and proposed some specific businesses that they thought would fit well within Prince George's County and the kind of goals of the county leadership. So those are just 3 examples of work that we have done to date for specifically Prince George's County planning. Next one. So we're going to dive in. But first, let me just see, are there any questions about anything that we have, that either Maha or I have talked about during this initial presentation? I see in the chat that Fatima said hello, so I'm glad to see you again.
Yeah, no other questions I see here at this time.
Okay, well, as we're going through the brainstorming, this is really the time for all of you to start thinking big about what might happen. As Maha said, we do up to 7 projects with the planning department every academic year, but what we look for is a lot more than 7 project ideas, partially because of that messiness of the faculty and point of contact match. But partially also because it gives your leadership some flexibility in terms of approving the projects that we would work on. So as I always say in these brainstorming sessions, no idea is too weird. Some of the weirdest ones have ended up being the best projects, and you know, students love weird. So that's good. And just to kind of reiterate what Maha said, the fact that you identify a problem or a potential project doesn't mean that you're going to have to be the point of contact. We will keep track of who mentioned it because you may be a great resource, but your leadership will identify the points of contact. So please don't worry about being it for any project that you mention. Maha and your leadership will work on that. And finally, again, please don't, as you mentioned, the problems, things that we're looking for are kind of a description of why this is an issue for you. Any resources you might already have, like if you've done a report on the project or a problem, or if there was something that was done 10 years ago but needs to be updated, that kind of thing is helpful. But with that, I'd just like to open it up. I think you can just unmute yourself and let us know if you've got ideas that we might tackle together in the coming year.
Can you guys hear us?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks for that, Kim. Yeah, a couple of the ones you highlighted, I know it has a pleasure being with and just a couple of things spring to mind for me. We would love to, and I think we talked about this, we would love to consider a Sounds of Prince George's Part 2. We'd love to consider how to take some of those recommendations forward that were in the report, and also maybe consider expanding it to a larger area or a different area in the county. We may not still be able to cover the whole county, but we can talk about areas that we might focus on. So that was one quick idea. Obviously, I can flesh that out further. And I did wonder at the other end, the last example you provided about the small scale businesses, I made sure that when the EDC, the Economic Development Corporation, are producing their new economic strategic plan for the county, they did reference that document. And it will be worth, I think, my connecting that with EDC and asking them if there's anything we could do to kind of keep that idea live and primed, and maybe have a geographic focus on a specific area that was identified or a cluster that was identified, you know. So I'll explore that with them first and foremost. If they like the idea, perhaps we can come back to it. That was just like a headline for now. I know I'm just going to get mine out of the way quickly and then pass on to everybody else. Largo, we're about to do a wayfinding, branding, the wayfinding, branding, and placemaking strategy is about to be published in May. So this might be one for the second round, the next, you know, the 2023 projects. But I wondered again, if looking at that, I think the other example you provided, whether we can kind of combine an update of that work with some of the recommendations from the strategy in combination with our DPW&T and others, and see if we can, you know, bring some of that to life. And the last couple of things might be a bit more of a stretch. One, I don't really know how to package this at this stage, but we hear a lot about the fact that people are concerned that when we propose bike lanes and things like that, we're basically signaling gentrification. And I wondered if there's some kind of story we can unpack about how cycling, specifically maybe cycling in Prince George's County, isn't a herald of placemaking, isn't a herald of gentrification. And I don't know how we might describe that, but I think we have a story in the county that is worth telling, because we keep coming up against this every time we propose projects with bike lanes in them, even in our downtowns. And my last quick idea is building on the oral histories, if you like, but more of a kind of less about the history, more about the living, the current life experiences, if you like. We're about to do the first of 3 pilot projects, placemaking projects, the first of which is in Suitland. I think it might be quite nice to pick up an oral history, sort of lots of interviews with people who were at that event and want to talk a bit more about what else they want to see in Suitland as much as what they like about what they already experienced in Suitland. I think it might be nice to capture some kind of combination of capturing why they went to that event and what they want to build on as a result of that. And we have a partner. We have Creative Suitland as a big partner in that, so it's not like this would be a struggle to get people involved. I don't think. I just haven't pulled it out more than that as you were all talking. That's what I scored on my paper. And I'll stop there for now. Thanks.
That's great, Adam. So interesting. And that bike one, in a lot of ways, links to work that we're already doing for you guys with Michael, that bike stress map, but also we're doing some work with parks on a bike master plan for the north. I guess it would be like the northeast area of the county, Upper Marlboro, but to Beltsville.
Okay.
And I know some of our public health folks have done work around comfort levels with pedestrians and letting kids go out on the street, how that varies by demographics and some of that. So that's a cool idea. I think we might be able to pull that out.
Yep.
Great, great. Anyone else?
Yes, we have Vanessa and Tom Rose. They've raised their hands, but Adam, I just want to have a question from you. When you mentioned oral histories in Suitland, do you have any specific issue in mind?
No, I was kind of see what happens at this event that we have at the beginning of April, and I was thinking it would just be nice to contact people who were at that event because they've got kind of the momentum, if you like, for wanting to see the change. Again, really badly formed in my brain, but there's something about not just saying, hey, you've lived in Suitland 50 years, tell us about that, but actually focus a bit more on, as a resident, what are you looking to see in the future? You know, something that could be put together into a nice little 20 or 30-minute sort of Suitland documentary, if you like. I'm not quite sure, but with a focus on, thinking about change and embracing change and wanting more change in that area.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now it's clear. All right. We'll take Vanessa first, and then we'll go to Tom. Vanessa?
Okay. Yes, I want to build on what Adam was talking about, which I think are some great projects. You've done the music history, but then how do you connect that with the history along the specific corridors in Largo? It would go well with what we're trying to do in placemaking, working with the residents in there, just beginning to think about what are the historical points along the Blue Line corridor, beginning at Largo and Dordt, going all the way down to Capitol Heights, documenting that and also determining how we might develop markers or ideas for markers in and along that corridor. So you have a two-hand approach, both looking at the historical significance along the corridor, but also coming with some ideas to design markers for placemaking along the corridor.
That's great. And I think, Adam, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Julia actually identified a couple of potential locations for markers. So there is some of that already.
Yes.
Cool. Vanessa, anything else? I know you're really involved in a lot of the arts in the county, and I would definitely be one of the new things at the University of Maryland is we have a creative placemaking minor that they're trying to get established on campus. So certainly there's a lot of opportunity to work with people from the arts schools and humanities. There's a lot of interest. So if you have other ideas, I'd love to hear them.
And that would be a good idea. We're getting ready to finalize the cultural arts study. So how do we begin to take some of that information out of that study and begin to recommend implementation measures? And so it would be good to work with some students in terms of specific ideas that's coming out of that study. How do we move it on forward? And then working with some of my partners in the development of that study, such as the Parks and Recreation and the Prince George's Arts and Humanities Council, on specific ideas those students can work on. I'm pretty sure that there are ideas in terms that we won't be able to get moving forward, but would love to sit down, Kim, and talk to you about how we might do that as a project.
Okay. And I'll bring two of the faculty members that are leading up that minor in placemaking into that conversation. It'll be a great opportunity for them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great.
Oh, that would be great. Okay.
Thanks, Vanessa. Now we can take Tom Gross. Tom?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. I hadn't used this headphone in the computer before. Yeah, I'm Tom Gross from Historic Preservation. As Kim said, I've had the pleasure of working with the PALS group on a number of projects with Jennifer Stabler over the past couple of years and really enjoyed it. So I was trying to think of some places or some themes related to historic preservation that we haven't tackled in the past through the PALS program. I came up with a few, and I may come up with some others after this, but a couple that are kind of location-based. There is a 80-acre site down in the Brandywine area, which you may be familiar with, called Wilmer's Park. And Wilmer's Park in the mid-20th century was a popular destination on the Chitlin circuit. So for African-American acts, musical acts, and others who couldn't necessarily perform or couldn't necessarily perform to African-American audiences, Wilmer's Park was a destination. It's owned by the Commission. It's under the stewardship of our Department of Parks and Recreation. It is, at this point, substantially deteriorated. The large dance hall that was kind of the centerpiece venue is in fairly ruinous condition, from what I understand from our colleagues there. But there is some thought being given to what to do with Wilmer's Park and how to interpret its history and commemorate what it meant for people, even in the not so distant past. I mean, there are plenty of people still around who patronized Wilmer's Park. So thinking about it kind of as a cultural landscape, and also, you know, given its current building, its current built environment, which is substantially deteriorated, there are a couple of elements that perhaps could be preserved, but how to interpret this site given its current condition. So that's kind of an embryonic idea, but something I was thinking about. Another kind of location-based thing up in the northern part of the county, the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, or BARC, up north of Greenbelt. This is a several thousand acre property, and there is likely to be some change on the site in the coming years. The federal government owns it, has certain plans for the property, and there's a Section 106 process through the National Historic Preservation Act dealing with potential impacts on the historic resources there, which go back to the early part of the 20th century. And so I think there could be a potential for a cultural landscape report or something like that. I think the scale would have to be kind of pinned down a little bit to be something that's doable within 14 weeks. But you could also look at it not just maybe from that site, but the history of Prince George's County as an agricultural research place. It wasn't limited to BARC. There was a site in Glendale also, a plant introduction station, which if you ask certain people, was very important to the agricultural and horticultural history of not just the county, but of the country. So, I think there's some potential there. I want to think about it a little bit more and what the scope might look like. But I just wanted to mention that. Something that isn't necessarily location-based, but it's something that we think about or are forced to think about quite a bit. We, through the development review process, we, meaning the Historic Preservation Commission and us as staff, are often challenged to recommend measures for ensuring architectural compatibility, for fostering, encouraging architectural compatibility of new construction adjacent to or within the viewshed of historic sites. And, I'm very curious, and I think it would be interesting to look at some case studies of other jurisdictions, how they think about it. Do they think about it? Do other, historic preservation or historic district commissions think it's important that adjacent construction or nearby construction somehow complement or be compatible with a historic site? And, I think you could generate some really interesting classroom discussion, particularly if you bring in architecture students about what that might mean and whether it's even worth thinking about. So that was something else I thought could be useful to us. Certainly, I mean, if there were thoughts that came out of that might inform our thinking about it, it would be great. And then the other two were just kind of continuations of work that's been done. So the restricted covenant work, I mean, as we've talked about, that's now gone over 2 semesters and could probably go several semesters into the future. Just continuing to map those areas of the county that had either racially restricted covenants or other types of restricted covenants. That work is worth continuing if there's the will to do it and the resources to do it. And then something that came out of the last go around with the restricted covenants was Stefan Wolke was looking at how to create or how to make land records that are on file with the state searchable. And it got to the point of being really exciting that he could, through optical character recognition, do keyword searches in land records going back at least to the point when they started being typewritten. Back further than that, it gets to be a little bit hairier, but he was trying to do that in the context of restricted covenants, but there's the potential to do other kinds of data mining with land records using that kind of tool, and we would certainly be supportive of that. Again, the scope needs to be worked out a little bit. The specific question would need to be worked out, but I think there's some potential there. So just a few things. Like I said, I can't guarantee that something won't pop into my head after this meeting, but that's what I've got so far.
That's great. Yeah, that OCR project, I think the iSchool is very interested in engaging on that, sort of in collaboration with historic preservation. So it's one of those neat opportunities where we might be able to bring a couple of groups together. I'm definitely hoping that one works out. Others? Oh, I'm seeing lots in the chat. So promoting bike tourism in Prince George's County. That occurred to me while Tom was talking. We did a project, a bike trail project in Beltsville Ag Center. I think it might have been for parks, or maybe it was for planning. I'm sorry, I'm kind of forgetting at this point. But we have done a pretty, the students did a pretty extensive look at how you could establish bike paths within Beltsville, and that's such an amazing place to ride. I can tell you because I've ridden there. Let's see, Brandon Scott wrote about greenhouse gas impacts of decisions. Scott, do you want to maybe elaborate that on that for a second? Would this be in response to the climate change work?
I think it's kind of a parallel to the climate change work. The climate action plan has a lot of information in it and a lot of ideas and what it spurred a lot of thinking about uh, the impacts of decisions we make or plans we make on climate. And so one of the things where we've fielded a lot of questions recently about climate impacts of whether it be plan recommendations or decisions that the planning board may make or the new subdivision and zoning ordinances. And we really don't have a data basis to really kind of report out even on an order of magnitude whether a certain course of action would result in greater emissions or fewer emissions or about the same. And having some sort of tool to use that is probably a little more locally based than EPA's tools, is something we could look at that I think kind of lends itself to academics.
Sure.
And could give us a little bit more information about how we could kind of at least, if it's not quantified, at least be like, this is something that could reduce emissions versus this is a course of action, whether it's a development or a new facility or a new road or something where this will have a negative impact on emissions, and then being able to do some kind of comparisons for costs and benefits of different alternatives. That's something that we could use more information on.
That sounds great. And you mentioned the EPA tools, and I know that there are several tools that have been used for this, but the idea of making that local or even setting up a national tool with local parameters so that it would be something you could use makes a lot of sense. The other thing I'll mention, we had a project that was identified. It actually came from a faculty member, but we passed it through your leadership. And that was the possibility of setting up microgrids, solar microgrids within the county. And that was, the idea came from somebody who works in Greenbelt within the city government there in Greenbelt. He's a consultant with them, but he also teaches at the University of Maryland. Some of you may know him. His name is Peter May. But he does a lot of work with the engineering students and the environmental studies students. And what he had suggested was the possibility of seeing with a couple of the larger apartment buildings adjacent to, or in Greenbelt, whether they could be set up for a solar microgrid with like what the cost would be, what the benefits would be, the amount of energy that could be generated, that type of thing. That project really appealed to me both for the greenhouse gas kinds of considerations, but also the equity considerations. And that one of the things we hear a lot about with solar power is that the only people who really benefit from the solar power are homeowners, people that have enough money to put the grid, the panels up on their own roofs. But this would be, benefiting people that are renters. And in some of the developments that Peter had identified, they're low to moderate income residents. So still kind of have that on my list of things that would be great to try and establish in the next year. That whole question about greenhouse gases is one that I, if we're not all really worried about it now, we're missing a lot of research. Zach, I think I see your hand up.
Yeah, I've got a few ideas for some correlative analysis and mapping, and it could be a series of projects around health equity outcomes, thinking about looking about access to park space, whether that's per area or per resident, street tree continuity, heat island effect, stuff like that, and being able to map maybe by census tracts, health equity outcomes and health issues to any one of those factors, and then kind of doing some mapping around prioritizing improvements or investments for particularly vulnerable communities.
It's a great idea. And we've, that bike stress map that we're producing this semester might be a good starting point for that, because it would help us identify not only access to parks, but also safe roadway facilities that could be part of a biking, either recreational or work biking path. So
yeah, and I know there's, you know, a decent amount of and growing body of work around, you know, heat island and street trees and stuff like that, and impacts on, you know, youth and a whole host of things. So that could be, you know, something worth exploring.
We had a landscape architecture faculty member do research on students' grade point average associated with street trees and how green the neighborhoods they lived in were. It was really fascinating. So you're right. There's a lot of interesting research coming out about that. And also just Baltimore had asked, and we never were able to pull off a study, but Baltimore City had asked about the impact of heat islands and increased summer temperatures on homeless or unsheltered people. So that, you know, all of this starts to kind of circle around. Other ideas? Maha and Zach, can I ask, are you going to be able to grab the chat? Because I'm not getting all of the cool ideas that are in there written down.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Then Michael's got his hand up too.
Okay, Michael?
So Michael's hand
Hi,
is.
I'm sorry. I had a hard time getting off of mute. Yes, I've listed a few suggestions. They include well, two areas. In terms of bicycling, and it was mentioned earlier, sometimes there's concerns that bicycle facilities lead to gentrification and displacement of people of color. And related to that, there's been a gender imbalance in cycling for quite some time, and concerns about that imbalance. And women of color tend to be even less represented among women, females in general. And so, two suggestions related to that would be a survey of attitudes on cycling for transportation of women of color, African American, Latinos, etc. And the second idea related to that is coming up with a strategy of promoting cycling for transportation among women of color. Often we hear about the food deserts, and people have availability in lower income communities to potato chips and prepared foods and alcohol, but not so much with produce. Um, while green grocers may be too far to walk, often they're within bicycling distance. So part of that would help with promotion. Also, a bicycle tourism, just an overall strategy for Prince George's County, of how to promote some of our historical sites, cultural sites, etc., by bicycling. The creation of signed walking for your heart health or health routes within local communities. That's an idea that I got from Ireland, where they have a little heart symbol and directions of this way to walk for heart health. So those are some items I'd just like to throw out for your consideration.
That's great. And both of them are really incredible ideas, and I think well within the possibility of students working on that. I'm sure you, Michael, saw the same thing I did during the pandemic, just a huge increase in the number of people who are walking on the bike paths and just walking generally in neighborhoods. It would be really great to build on that and make sure it didn't go away with people kind of going back to normal, whatever normal is going to be.
Oh, if I could add, I had one other quick thing. To investigate to see if there is a need for a bicycling 101 class for academic credit at the University of Maryland for students out of there. I was involved with a project at Montgomery College in Rockville where such a class was created and served as a guest lecturer for several semesters along that. And it was very rewarding. You had a lot of students who never learned how to ride a bike before, and especially students from foreign countries where bicycling was not embraced, and they were just very happy. A woman in her 40s who finally learned how to ride a bicycle was one of her lifelong goals. So another suggestion.
And I wonder if that could be something that could be offered to schools also.
Oh, certainly.
Like, I mean, like K through 12 schools or other community colleges within the county. That's great.
I know another hand is raised, but before we move to another person, Michael, I have a question from you. When you talked about the first project regarding gentrification, do you have a specific target group in mind? Are you talking about that women of color? Is that a specific survey group that you're thinking to target? Or no, it can be a general questionnaire for everyone.
Well, two groups I'm thinking of in particular, African American women, and there is a group called Black Women Bike.
Yeah.
And they could probably might be contacted as a resource. And the second group are Latinas. Just my anecdotal observations, there's a lot of Latino men who bike for transportation, but just anecdotally, I don't see the same level among Latinas, and wondering, are there cultural concerns? I've heard from anecdotal evidence that there is in some of the Latin American countries. So I think that would be very, very helpful.
Okay, and then thank you. And then I have another question for the third project that you've mentioned, bicycling tourism, creation of signs. So do you have any specific signage in mind? Like, I know there are projects that have like apps and they have information on the apps for tourism. App is created and they have signs on that. Is that you have in mind, or is just the wayfinding?
No, more of a promotional campaign, perhaps looking at, well, how do we promote tourism? Maybe a start is, how do we promote tourism in general in Prince George's County?
Okay.
And are there opportunities there to include cycling? And then to reach out to a lot of the bicycling clubs who do recreational riding. They may have routes that they've selected that embrace upon activities of locations of interest, major activity centers that could be used. And how do you come up with suggestions for marketing campaigns to promote that in marketing literature to stimulate additional tourism opportunities?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now I have another hand raised. Fred?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think one interesting and kind of important topic that the students might begin to address is the whole issue of race, historic preservation, race and preservation. this is a very comprehensive, big issue, but I think, you know, to have the students look at this issue, I know there are a number of preservation organizations such as the National Trust, the Maryland Historical Trust, the MAHDC, and even the University of Maryland, are all beginning to look at and analyze and confront this issue of race and preservation, because we, at this point, you know, have an inadequate system in place through the National Register of Historic Places and the criteria that's demanded through that program. So I thought maybe they could look at kind of an analysis from other jurisdictions, a comparative analysis of preservation ordinances, comparative analysis of other programs that commemorate or recognize or even designate African American properties that otherwise would not fall within National Register criteria. And again, specifically looking at Prince George's County and some of the historic resources, African American resources that we have that have not made National Register, such as the historic Fairmont High School. And I know that Tom Gross mentioned Wilbur Park and other important African American sites that kind of fall into this gap here in proper recognition. Again, dealing with these issues of race and preservation through this preservation survey. It's a big issue. It's a huge issue, but I think it would be good to start the dialogue in the county.
That's a great idea, Fred. And, you know, it certainly is something that our students are really concerned about and would really, I think that whole concept would resonate with the courses. So thank you for raising it. Others, Fatima, we worked a lot with you before. Do you have any ideas, projects that have occurred to you in the last year? I don't think we had any projects with you this year.
I believe Fatima has left.
Oh, okay.
Had to go, yeah.
Okay. Others, there are a number of names on this participant list that we haven't worked with in the past. I hope you'll feel free to raise any ideas you might have. So let me just toss out some general topic areas to maybe spark some other ideas. Are there community plans or different kind of planning projects that you are working on that might benefit from either like a data analysis to provide background information, demographic work? So that would be one area. The census data is all coming out. We've received a lot of the housing data and some of the basic demographic information, but this year will be a really rich year in terms of getting information out of the 2020 census. So that's another arena. I can see doing some interactive maps that show that census data for Prince George's County with the ability to kind of add topics as the data becomes available. We have a new partnership with the geography department here on campus, and they've done some really interesting census / other topic investigations for us with the state Department of Planning this last semester. Let's see, other climate change kind of work. I know housing's a big issue, and the design of housing, maybe the types of developments that are being approved, any of that could be also interesting. Does any of this spark ideas?
Do we have a message from Kip in the chat that Sarah and Kier are, yes. Kip, would you like to say it yourself or shall I just?
Sure. Sorry, Maha. Thank you. Yeah, we do have our budget for next year has not been approved. So that's upcoming, but there are 2 new sector plans. So once that budget is approved, those potentially could be looked at for some pre-planning work that you're talking about. Potentially Northern Gateway is one area, and it has a diverse community, Latino, so that could be interesting. We have a new research section in our information management division. So I would, and they're very active on what you were talking about, the GIS maps and interactive. So I would really, that might be a separate offline conversation with Qui, because you don't really want to duplicate any work that she's already working on with her team. So not that there couldn't be something, but I would really just suggest that you coordinate with her.
That's a great idea, and it's wonderful to hear that you've got that. I mean, that is one thing that Maha and I have already talked about, that any of the projects that we would identify that have impact on your IT staff, either the that research group or just generally, we need to make sure we get them involved. So we will
Yeah, I mean, they're doing a lot of probably potential work with some, Esri interactive maps, maybe some Esri hubs. So there's a lot of different tools out there they're exploring. So it would really be a good conversation with them up front.
Definitely. We will do that.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Maha.
2 follow-up conversations to have, but that's great.
Hi, this is Bill from that research group. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I'm new with the commission, but I just thought I'd introduce myself. I'm Bill Lescure. I work for Qui actually in that research section, and was hired on as a GIS specialist. So just to echo what Kip said, I think Qui is a good person to reach out to. I haven't talked with her specifically about the PALS program or anything related, but I think she would certainly be a good contact there. So yep.
Right. Very good. So just kind of generally, what kind of you're new, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but what kinds of research topics have you guys tackled to date? Are you engaged in?
Well, so far it's been really census related, demographic stuff, like you were getting at there, and I've been working on the municipality boundaries a little bit as well.
Oh.
Annexations is another topic that I've had right out of the gates. And just some sort of ad hoc map requests as they come in as well. But yeah, those are the big picture things.
So Bill, I think we should get you and Clee plugged into that bike stress map project that we're doing, because that may have some long-term benefits for you guys as maybe a layer within the data that you're collecting.
Okay, great. That sounds good. I look forward to hear more. Yep.
Yeah, we will get an email out so that you can at least participate in the midterm meeting that'll be coming up.
Okay,
so you
great.
can see what they're doing. We're really lucky that the adjunct professor that teaches our advanced GIS course also works with Maryland DOT, and he helped develop the bike stress map that was done for all the roadways in the state. And so he's using Prince George's County as a way of exploring that, maybe fine tuning that stress map for the entire state by doing more exploration in our county. So kind of cool.
That's great. I'll Maybe I should drop Qui's, or you probably have her contact information, so.
No, actually, I don't. So if you don't
Oh,
mind dropping it, that would be great.
okay, sure. That sounds good.
Okay.
And Kim, there are two new studies, data analysis studies in the proposed FY23 budget. Again, they're out of countywide, and Jackie Filson is leading those two studies. So we can, I'll give Maha the slides on those so you can at least know the premise of those studies. One's an update to the shopping center study. And the county's just working on adopting the update to the economic development strategic plan. So there's another follow-up study. So I'll give that to Maha for you, just so you know what's ongoing. Because it's consultant services. So just again, coordination and don't want to duplicate anyone.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think we've been fairly successful in on some of these projects. If the students can come in early enough, they can just take a slice that would feed into consultant reports, or if they're coming in afterwards, looking at implementation of reports, that type of thing. So that's great. Definitely, we're not in competition with consultants. As I mentioned, our students don't do like full-blown shovel ready or complete studies. So let's see, others. I don't like to point fingers at people. Any other ideas that you might have? We've got some good ones here.
I think one other one, maybe for Adam and his team and probably Vanessa, is almost like looking at a placemaking toolkit based on some strategies we're looking at. So we can maybe talk offline with Adam and Vanessa. We have an approved approach. So, maybe there are some things that could be done as part of that effort.
Okay. How about transportation? We haven't talked much about transportation, and to be honest, I don't have the best track record of getting engineering students engaged, but transportation, parking, are there locations that you have problems or approaches that you might want to take to changing how you do transportation studies, incorporating some of that health impact that Zach mentioned or that Michael mentioned? Well, that might be a conversation to have with the transportation supply.
Maha might be able to arrange something with Crystal Hancock and Will Capers. They're up, the MPOT update is ongoing. That's a very large project with consultant services. So I don't know if there's might be worth a discussion with them. If there's any special thing that's not being handled by the consultants.
Okay. So that was Crystal Hancock, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second name.
Capers is the supervisor for transportation. It's out of countywide.
Okay.
And they're really sort of, they're working on an existing conditions report, and they've started some community meetings, but you never know, there might be something else that could, they might want special assistance with or research.
Great. So. Thank you. Thanks. So some of you may know I came out of transportation planning, so I always have to bring that up when we have these conversations. Well, I don't want to just keep you on if there aren't any other ideas, but if just, I guess, one last call.
I do have one more, maybe. Cool. We can talk to Maha and maybe Scott, but we have urban street standards through the county, and it really might be nice to produce sort of a visual guide, like really show people what that means. Drawings, right now they're not very lively, so it might be a good design opportunity for someone.
That'd be great.
Architecture.
And that would help us from a community planning perspective, the community understand those different guidelines and what they mean, whether it could be like almost a little video of different options, animation.
It's so funny that you bring this up, Kip, because we just had a small group of architecture students do drawings for Maryland Department of Natural Resources on stream and coastal resilience, and just to illustrate ways that you can make those facilities more resilient. And their idea is that they'll use those in their public engagement. And we'll make them, copyright free so that they can be used any place. I can see some students really getting interested in that, maybe even the landscape architecture students.
Yeah, I think that's what we're looking at from an engagement point of view. There's different ways to accomplish a bike lane, within different right of ways. And Scott Rowe and can provide MAHA the standards from the DPW&T, but if there's some way to make those more engaging and help community understand the different options. When you say urban street standard, it doesn't really mean much to the average person, but it's kind of where the public realm is, the streets, different way to do the bike lanes, cycle track off, different options. If there was some way to visually make that very appealing and understandable, it would help the community in the discussion.
Yeah, very good. We'll definitely get that one on the list. I can see a lot of possibilities for it. I'm sure Matt's chomping at the bit as he hears this.
Yeah, so anytime we can do little videos to put things on social media, and it would be very helpful.
Great. Okay. Well, with all of those great ideas, very good, Zach. Thank you. The next step, for some of you who haven't worked with PALS, this may have been a bit overwhelming to try and think of projects during this defined time period. Maha and I are both here and more than willing to hear ideas. One word of warning. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to put together a fairly complete list of projects from this discussion, and we'll be sharing them with Kip and others just to make sure that we're on the right path. So if you could contact us with additional ideas within that couple of week time frame, that would be really helpful, because I wait to actually start trying to make those matches with faculty until we get an approved list. So please think through things that you're facing in your day-to-day work that students might be able to add something to. We'll get that approved list and we'll start working to match the faculty and points of contact. Typically, it's hard to get a hold of faculty before the end of the semester because they're kind of busy, but we will start as soon as we get an approved list sending that out. That being said, there are always things that come up during the academic year, and we're still open to those, and Maha and Kip and others will work with you if you have ideas that come up that that they're in support of to get us that information. We do want to make sure that if we add projects to the list that we're adding ones that your leadership is comfortable with, but we will do that. So Zach, the next slide. So in order to do that, you have Maha and my contact information there, and also the information for Kathy and Barbara. If you have any questions, any of the three of us are happy to work on that. I also wanted, and thanks to Maha for putting this together, you can see the PALS webpage there. And when Kathy was talking, she mentioned doing the field trips with the students. She's put together this Flickr collection, and so that is the link to those the PALS photos that she's got processed so far. And as I mentioned, you're certainly you can use any of these. We ask that you credit the PALS program or Kathy, but you're welcome to use any of those as you move forward. Anything else you wanted to add, Kip or Maha?
No, it's up. I'll defer to Maha. She's leading the effort. Thank you.
No, I think everything's all covered. I was just thinking, I was waiting for everyone to finish up their like brainstorming and ideas. I just have one last one, and I can share it right now. Which is that we have a lot of plans that have long-term implementation strategies, and like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, but we can ask students to like contact stakeholders, civic associations, local groups who are interested to improve any of the areas that we have already a recommendation for, and work on that for like it can come under like tactical urbanism, and I'm not talking about pilot projects, which are still 6 months to a year. I'm talking about even short-term goals that people can be involved with, but it's really a project that how to involve those stakeholders and how can these efforts be done, like whom to, like the list of people, and then what is the idea, how to bring it to life.
Great idea.
I will say that we're working on a database of all the implementation strategies across all the plans, and that lists the key partners. So that might be a variation of that. A lot of that work is ongoing. So
okay, thanks, Kip.
Great, very good. Well, thank you to everyone for taking the time. You know, our work with you has over the years just been so amazing. Maha's been an incredible partner. Karen also amazing. And Fred's advice is always very helpful. The students love the opportunity to work with you and your staff. I think you have, the department has really opened people's eyes to the kind of sophisticated work that's being done in Prince George's County in so many different aspects. And so really appreciate both your time in this meeting, but also your time over the years in your contributing to our students' education and kind of their future as we move forward. So thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week.
All right. Thank you for UMD faculty, other members of faculty, Kim, and also the students for being here with us. So thank you, everyone. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.